Speed. Man's need for it is undeniable. He expresses it in the sky with thrusting jet aircraft, on the ground with screaming race cars, on water with thundering hydroplanes and magnificent sailboats. He uses power from explosive fuels, power from the wind, power from his own muscles, whatever it takes to attain the objective. That ability to go so fast that the wind literally splits before him. In these sports of raw speed, we see man's uncanny ability to become one with a machine. The art of using a tool to perfection. Speed doesn't come easy on water. Racing over the waves at 120 miles per hour takes more thrust than 200 on land. But water packs a resistance far greater than that of air. The secret? Get the boat up out of the water so it can fly over the top. But not too far up, because even the best boats make very poor airplanes. Hidden away deep in Florida alligator territory is a test facility so secret it's not even shown on the maps. A place known only as Lake X. Here, the fastest boat racers in the world come to experiment, to test their latest equipment and most promising new ideas. For the secrets of speed on water are carefully guarded information. In this program, we're going to take you behind the scenes to discover those inside secrets. And to do that, we've turned first to one of the fastest men in the business, Reggie Fountain. Not since the legendary Don Aronell, father of the cigarette boat, has one man so successfully designed, built, and raced his own boats. A former world champion tunnel boat racer, Reggie Fountain is now chairman of a multi-million-dollar company that produces a new generation of speedboats that are among the fastest in the world. Reggie is a hands-on CEO. His office, every chance he gets, the cockpit of his 120-mile-per-hour race boat, hands on the throttle. This past season, he scored victories in both American Powerboat Association and Offshore Professional Tour competition. Reggie's secret of speed begins with a simple idea.
Well, the more you get the boat up out of the water and into the air, the faster the boat will generally run. Water hydrodynamically poses much greater resistance for high speed than does the air. So the more the boat is piercing the air as opposed to the water, the faster the boat's going to be. Downside of that is that it takes a lot of horsepower and a lot of money to get you up there in some cases. If you're up on the top of the water, depending on how rough the water is, the boat might tend to be quite a bit rougher than if you're knifing through the water.
The first key breakthrough in getting a boat to knife through the water was the development of the Deep V hull.
Deep V is exactly what it says. You're shaped much like a V, and you knife through the water and smooth out the waves is the idea there. That has a drawback to the extent that the deeper you pierce the water, the slower the boat's going to run. So what we tried to do with the boats that we build is to design a modified type of V-bottom boat that gives the advantages of knifing through the top of the water rather than deep down in the water. So it lifts you above the water, but it still knifes through the water.
The next major breakthrough in the search for speed on water, the invention of the stern drive.
The stern drive, which is an offshoot of the outboard motor hooked up to a automobile V8 engine from within the boat, is probably one of the most innovative developments in high-performance boating, or any boating for that matter, because the stern drive allows you to trim the boat just like an outboard does. And a boat that is trimmable, as opposed to a boat with a shaft that comes through the bottom of the boat, is, by a test that we've done, gives 30 to 60% more performance with the same horsepower, because you can trim the boat at different angles for different speeds and for different water conditions. For example, you trim much more differently for calm water than you would for rough water.
Now, let's take a little ride with Reggie in one of his Merc Cruiser-powered high-performance boats and watch his secrets. The first step, get the boat up on plane.
So as we move forward, the boat will lift up and over. And when you feel it pop up on top of the water, then you're on a plane. That means it's broken free of the water and is running on top of the water rather than plowing a deep hole through the water, much like a submarine would do. When we initially take off, we trim the trim tabs on the back of the boat down. That means we drop them down below the bottom of the boat, so that as the water comes running off the bottom of the boat, it hits the trim tabs, which are down. So the water comes off the bottom and hits that tab and lifts it up. If the tab is bolted to the back of the boat, which it is, that tends to kick the tail of the boat up and the nose over and get you up on plane quicker, which is up on top of the water. So you want your tabs down to trim that boat up. And you have your drives up under the boat, pushing towards the bottom of the boat, pushing towards the surface to lay it over again. Once the boat pops on top and planes, then you want to lift the tabs up to allow the nose to come back up out of the water and run over the top of the water. And you're trying to get the boat more in the air at that point once you've popped up on top of the water and gotten on a plane. So then you want to start trimming your drives out and having your tabs come up the faster you go, until you run into some rough water, in which case you may want to bring your tabs back down just a little bit and your drives in just a little bit to knife through the top side of the waves. I say the top side of the waves as opposed to deep down in the waves, because if you have a good designed boat, planing properly, you'll be running up on top of the water rather than plowing down through the water.
But just how far above the water can you run and still maintain control?
You're better off having that boat riding right across the top of the waves, maintaining as much light contact with the water as you can. Way up in the air, it's usually way out of control. You don't have any propellers pushing you, and so you're much better to skim across the top of the waves rather than becoming airborne. And if you give the boat too much lift in rough sea conditions, you're apt to take off, which is not a very safe way to run a boat and not a very smooth way or fast way to run a boat. So trim is, again, very important depending on water conditions as well as speed conditions.
The next secret, coaxing the boat into a turn.
We drop the tabs down just a little. We bring the drives in a little to tighten the boat back into the water, because I said as you drop the tabs and bring the drives in, the boat tends to plow down into the water more and would allow it to track more around the corner. If you're up on top, really running fast and making very little contact with the water, as you would be doing in a high-speed planing condition, it's harder to get the boat to track in a corner. So I trim the drives in and the tabs down to give the boat better contact, and it tracks around the turns much, much better.
Championship Offshore Racing, the ultimate test of speed on water.
The top speed of our racing boats, both our twin-engine manufacturer's V-bottom boat, which is basically an open-class boat, and our triple-engine super boat, both run in the neighborhood of 120 miles an hour. This boat will run from 80 to 100 miles an hour in 3.7 seconds.
Flying the waves at that speed requires a fine touch with the throttle, along with lots of horsepower. Power for Fountain's offshore racing boats comes from Merc Cruiser, 1,100 horsepower twin-turbo V8s, fresh from the shop of renowned engine tuner, Troy Dennis.
Without the horsepower that he packs in there and the dependability that he packs into these engines, we'd have a very hard time maintaining the success that we've gotten into. In our racing boats, we normally have more than one person running the boat. Usually there's someone throttling the boat and possibly trimming the boat, and then there's someone navigating the boat, that is telling you which way to go. And then there's the driver who's pointing the boat in the direction that the navigator tells him to go. There are an awful lot of functions, and of course you would appoint the navigator and possibly the throttle man to watch all the gauges on the dash, particularly the most important gauges, to make sure that you're not having a problem. We have helmets on. We can talk back and forth freely to each other.
100 miles an hour, 5,000. He can't even catch our ass on the slow down and wait for him. I was 110 for you there. You were hauling ass, son. How we look on our temper to us? I'm looking good. We're about
IOGP tunnel boats, powered by a single high-performance 2-liter outboard. They get their name from their unique tunnel-shaped hull, which lifts the boat up out of the water, allowing it to run on a cushion of air. These are the Formula One machines of boat racing, capable of astounding performance. From a standing start, they reach 100 miles per hour in just 5 seconds, hitting a top speed of 140. But most amazing is their extraordinary ability to turn harder than just about any other vehicle in the world. By dropping one side of the tunnel or sponson into the water, they in effect corner as if on rails, producing side forces of over 4 Gs.
Actually, what you're trying to do is fly the boat just above the water with the one tip or one propeller blade in the water for stability. They're kind of like riding on a rocket ship, really, because they got a lot of acceleration. I mean, you can be going 135, 40 mile an hour in one direction. You can turn around and be going 120 back in the other direction. You pull about 4.5 Gs in the corner.
You're trimming the motor in and out. When you trim the motor out, it gives you more acceleration and lifts the boat up more. When you trim in, it lowers the nose of the boat to set the boat into the turn.
When you come to a turn and you settle the boat, the water comes all the way up to the driver on the sponsons, and when you start to turn, it's just like carving. And for a lack of better terms, it's just like you're on a railroad track.
To fully appreciate the cornering ability of these machines, consider the fact that they pull more G-forces in a turn than does an Indy car.
The difference there is that an Indy car, once again, has a track, and they just lose traction at a certain point. And these things, as long as the boat can stay on the water and curving and hooked up, it'll turn as sharp as you can. Basically, on the steering wheel, we have 3 buttons, and those are located in very convenient places, and those are what we call the down buttons. And what those do is trim the motor down, which forces the nose of the boat under. On the left foot floor, there's another button that trims the motor out. So in essence, when you're driving one of these boats, you'll find a good attitude that has the boat, what we'll call flying down the straightaway. Just prior to the corner, you'll trim it under just a little bit to get the boat closer. Right at the turn pin, you'll crack the throttle just to set the boat, turn it. And then at the same time, you'll stab the throttle wide open and stand on the trim button, which brings the boat back off, which literally flies it off the corner. And basically, the driver controls the attitude of the engine in and out and up and down, so you can get the proper height and feeling. And an experienced driver can tell either by the seat of his pants how the boat's flying, because they get a very loose feeling, or in some cases on the dashboard we'll have a trim indicator which tells the driver the attitude or the angle of the engine.
The engines powering these little rocket ships start off as stock outboards.
They're Mercury outboard V6s. They're 2-liter capacity, which is 122.5 cubic inches. We run electronic fuel injection, and basically it starts out to be actually a stock 150 horsepower, and we're getting out of that engine now about 320 horsepower. So it's like playing with a hand grenade.
They'll turn about 10,000 RPM. The boats themselves, unrigged, weighs about 325 pounds. So the horsepower to weight ratio is quite high. It's amazingly high. We got a lot of torque out of these engines, so that's the reason we get the acceleration from 0 to 100 in less than 5 seconds out of them.
And then when you put all that together in a tunnel boat that weighs 800 pounds and goes 140 miles an hour, you've got the aerodynamics to worry about how you're going to keep it on the water, because everybody goes, you trim them up to get them off the water for acceleration, but you have to keep a certain amount of wetted surface, and you got to keep that propeller in the water a little bit for stability.
Yeah, that's basically it, is to get the boat out of the water and just barely be running on the back of the boat and fly it almost like an airplane.
Like flying an airplane, the secret of control is finesse, not muscle power.
You can muscle them, and some drivers do muscle them, but generally the fastest way around the race course is to let the boat do its own deal. I mean, the boat obviously can't think for itself, but you got to help it as much as you can. If you muscle them, it generally slows them down, and they don't like that. They generally have characteristics all of themselves. They're a light, fragile boat, and they like to be treated that way when you're driving them.
Come into a corner, you trim the boat under a little bit to set it, and then you hit the corner and you trim it out as quick as you can to carry the nose, to lift the nose of the boat up and you carry it out that high as far as you can just before you blow the boat over.
The blowover. The tunnel boat racer's worst nightmare. 1 second, he's trimming the boat up, up for more speed. Then too much. He catches air underneath, and he's out of control.
Trimming the engine out is when you do that, you lift the bow of the boat higher and higher, and it gets to a point where the wind will actually get into there and push the boat over backwards. Up to that point, though, there's a very fine line, and of course you gain speed the more you can get away with that. So it's a very fine line how far you can go to how fast you can go.
You're running on such a fine edge there that you know, you're trying to get every bit of acceleration out of it. You know, you want to win the race and you want to hang the boat up high. And a good stiff breeze comes up when you're running down the straightaway, and you know, it'll pick the boat right up and blow you right over.
Or the other instances, if you come down the straightaway too fast and you're flying it too high and you don't give it a chance to settle, you just turn it. Eventually, when it does settle, you got the steering wheel already turned and it hooks up. It's just that much more, and it just literally pushes it around and over.